Edgar Allan Poe by Edgar Allan Poe. By James Russell Lowell. The situation of American literature is anomalous. It has no center, or if it have, it is like that of the sphere of Hermes. It is divided into many systems, each revolving round its several suns, and often presenting to the rest only the faint glimmer of a milk and waiter way. Our capital city, unlike London or Paris, is not a great central heart from which life and vigor radiate to the extremities, but resembles more an isolated umbilicus stuck down as near as may be to the center of the land, and seeming rather to tell a legend of former usefulness than to serve any present need. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, each has its literature almost more distinct than those of the different dialects of Germany. And the young Queen of the West has also one of her own, of which some articulate rumor barely has reached us dwellers by the Atlantic. Perhaps there is no task more difficult than the just criticism of contemporary literature. It is even more grateful to give praise where it is needed than where it is deserved. And friendship so often seduces the iron stylus of justice into a vague flourish that she writes what seems rather like an epitaph than a criticism. Yet if praise be given as an alms, we could not drop so poisonous a one into any man's hat. The critic's ink may suffer equally from too large an infusion of nutgalls or of sugar, but it is easier to be generous than to be just, and we might readily put faith in that fabulous direction to the hiding place of truth, did we judge from the amount of water which we usually find mixed with it. Remarkable experiences are usually confined to the inner life of imaginative men, but Mr. Poe's biography displays a vicissitude and peculiarity of interest, such as is rarely met with the offspring of a romantic marriage. And left an orphan at an early age, he was adopted by Mr. Allan, a wealthy Virginian, whose barren marriage bed seemed the warranty of a large estate to the young poet. Having received a classical education in England, he returned home and entered the University of Virginia, where after an extravagant course followed by reformation at the last extremity, he was graduated with the highest honors of his class. Then came a boyish attempt to join the fortunes of the insurgent Greeks, which ended at St. Petersburg, where he got into difficulties through want of a passport, from which he was rescued by the American consul and sent home. He now entered the military academy at West Point, from which he obtained a dismissal on hearing of the birth of a son to his adopted father by a second marriage, an event which cut off his expectations as an heir. The death of Mr. Allan, in whose will his name was not mentioned soon after, relieved him of all doubt in this regard, and he committed himself at once to authorship for a support. Previously to this, however, he had published in 1827 a small volume of poems, which soon ran through 3 editions, and excited high expectations of its author's future distinction in the minds of many competent judges. That no certain augury can be drawn from a poet's earliest lispings, there are instances enough to prove. Shakespeare's first poems, though brimful of vigor and youth and picturesqueness, give but a very faint promise of the directness, condensation, and overflowing moral of his maturer works. Perhaps, however, Shakespeare is hardly a case in point, his Venus and Adonis having been published, we believe, in his 26th year. Milton's Latin verses show tenderness, a fine eye for nature, and a delicate appreciation of classic models, but give no hint of the author of a new style. In poetry, Pope's youthful pieces have all the sing-song wholly unrelieved by the glittering malignity and eloquent irreligion of his later productions. Collins' Callow Nambipambi died, and gave no sign of the vigorous and original genius which he afterward displayed. We have never thought that the world lost more in the marvelous Boy Chatterton than a very ingenious imitator of obscure and antiquated dullness. Where he becomes original, as it is called, the interest of ingenuity ceases, and he becomes stupid. Kirk White's promises were endorsed by the respectable name of Mr. Southey, but surely with no authority from Apollo. They have the merit of a traditional piety, which to our mind, if uttered at all, had been less objectionable in the retired closet of a diary. And in the sober raiment of prose, they do not clutch hold of the memory with the drowning pertinacity of Watts. Neither have they the interest of his occasional simple lucky beauty. Burns, having fortunately been rescued by his humble station from the contaminating society of the best models, wrote well and naturally from the first. Had he been unfortunate enough to have had an educated taste, we should have had a series of poems from which, as from his letters, we could sift here and there a kernel from the mass of chaff. Coleridge's youthful efforts give no promise whatever of that poetical genius which produced at once the wildest, tenderest, most original, and most purely imaginative poems of modern times. Byron's Hours of Idleness would never find a reader, except from an intrepid and indefatigable curiosity. In Wordsworth's first preludings, there is but a dim foreboding of the creator of an era from Southey's early poems. A safer augury might have been drawn, they show the patient investigator, the close student of history, and the unwearied explorer of the beauties of predecessors. But they give no assurances of a man who should add aught to stock of household words, or to the rarer and more sacred delights of the fireside, or the arbor, the earliest specimens of Shelley's poetic mind, already also give tokens of that ethereal sublimation in which the spirit seems to soar above the regions of words, but leaves its body the verse to be entombed without hope of resurrection in a mass of them. Cowley is generally instanced as a wonder of precocity, but his early insipidities show only a capacity for rhyming and for the metrical arrangement of certain conventional combinations of words, a capacity wholly dependent on a delicate physical organization and an unhappy memory. An early poem is only remarkable when it displays an effort of reason, and the rudest verses in which we can trace some conception of the ends of poetry are worth all the miracles of smooth juvenile versification. A schoolboy, one would say, might acquire the regular seesaw of Pope, merely by an association with the motion of the playground tilt. Mr. Poe's early productions show that he could see through the verse to the spirit beneath, and that he already had a feeling that all the life and grace of the one must depend on and be modulated by the will of the other. We call them the most remarkable boyish poems that we have ever read. We know of none that can compare with them for maturity of purpose and a nice understanding of the effects of language and meter. Such pieces are only valuable when they display what we can only express by the contradictory phrase of innate experience. We copy one of the shorter poems written when the author was only 14. There is a little dimness in the filling up, but the grace and symmetry of the outline are such as few poets ever attain. There is a smack of ambrosia about it. To Helen, Helen, thy beauty is to me like those Nicean barks of yore, that gently o'er a perfumed sea, the weary wayworn wanderer bore to his own native shore on desperate seas. Long wont to roam thy hyacinth hair, thy classic face, thy naiad airs have brought me home to the glory that was Greece, and the grandeur that was Rome. Lo, in yon brilliant windonish, how statue-like I see thee stand, the agate lamp within thy hand, ah Psyche, from the regions which are holy land. It is the tendency of the young poet that impresses us here, is no withering scorn, no heart-blighted air. It has safely got into its teens, none of the drawing groom sansculottism, which Byron had brought into vogue. All is limpid and serene, with a pleasant dash of the Greek helicon in it. The melody of the whole, too, is remarkable. It is not of that kind which can be demonstrated arithmetically upon the tips of the fingers. It is of that finer sort which the inner ear alone can estimate. It seems simple, like a Greek column, because of its perfection. In a poem named Ligeia, under which title he intended to personify the music of nature, our beau poet gives us the following exquisite picture. Ligeia, Ligeia, my beautiful one, whose harshest idea will to melody run, say, is it thy will on the breezes to toss, or capriciously still like the lone albatross incumbent on night, as she on the air to keep watch with delight on the harmony there? John Neal himself, a man of genius, and whose lyre has been too long capriciously silent, appreciated the high merit of these and similar passages, and drew a proud horoscope for their author. Mr. Poe had that indescribable something which men have agreed to call genius. No man could ever tell us precisely what it is, and yet there is none who is not inevitably aware of its presence, and its power. Let talent writhe and contort itself as it may, it has no such magnetism, larger of bone and sinew it may be, but the wings are wanting. Talent sticks fast to earth, and its most perfect works have still 1 foot of clay. Genius claims kindred with the very workings of nature herself, so that a sunset shall seem like a quotation from Dante. And if Shakespeare be read in the very presence of the sea itself, his verses shall but seem nobler, for the sublime criticism of ocean. Talent may make friends for itself, but only genius can give to its creations the divine power of winning love and veneration. Enthusiasm cannot cling to what itself is unenthusiastic, nor will he ever have disciples who has not himself impulsive zeal enough to be a disciple. Great wits are allied to madness only inasmuch as they are possessed and carried away by their demon, while talent keeps him, as Paracelsus did, securely prisoned in the pommel of his sword. To the eye of genius, the veil of the spiritual world is ever rent asunder, that it may perceive the ministers of good and evil who throng continually around it. No man of mere talent ever flung his inkstand at the devil. When we say that Mr. Poe had genius, we do not mean to say that he has produced evidence of the highest. But to say that he possesses it at all is to say that he needs only zeal industry, and a reverence for the trust reposed in him to achieve the proudest triumphs and the greenest laurels. If we may believe the Longinuses and Aristotles of our newspapers, we have quite too many geniuses of the loftiest order to render a place among them at all desirable, whether for its hardness of attainment or its seclusion. The highest peak of our Parnassus is according to these gentlemen by far the most thickly settled portion of the country, a circumstance which must make it an uncomfortable residence for individuals of a poetical temperament, if love of solitude be as immemorial tradition, asserts a necessary part of their idiosyncrasy. Mr. Poe has two of the prime qualities of genius, a faculty of vigorous, yet minute analysis, and a wonderful fecundity of imagination. The first of these faculties is as needful to the artist in words as a knowledge of anatomy is to the artist in colors or in stone. This enables him to conceive truly, to maintain a proper relation of parts, and to draw a correct outline while the second groups fills up. And colors both of these Mr. Poe has displayed with singular distinctness in his prose, works the last predominating in his earlier tales, and the first in his later ones in judging of the merit of an author and assigning him his niche among our household gods. We have a right to regard him from our own point of view, and to measure him by our own standard. But in estimating the amount of power displayed in his works, we must be governed by his own design, and placing them by the side of his own ideal. Find how much is wanting we differ from Mr. Poe in his opinions of the objects of art. He esteems that object to be the creation of beauty, and perhaps it is only in the definition of that word that we disagree with him, but in what we shall say of his writings, we shall take his own standard as our guide. The temple of the god of song is equally accessible from every side, and there is room enough in it for all who bring offerings or seek an oracle. In his tales, Mr. Poe has chosen to exhibit his power chiefly in that dim region, which stretches from the very utmost limits of the probable into the weird confines of superstition and unreality. He combines in a very remarkable manner two faculties, which are seldom found, united: a power of influencing the mind of the reader by the impalpable shadows of mystery, and a minuteness of detail which does not leave a pin or a button unnoticed. Both are in truth the natural results of the predominating quality of his mind, to which we have before alluded: analysis. It is this which distinguishes the artist. His mind at once reaches forward to the effect to be produced. Having resolved to bring about certain emotions in the reader, he makes all subordinate parts tend strictly to the common center. Even his mystery is mathematical to his own mind. To him, X is a known quantity all along in any picture that he paints. He understands the chemical properties of all his colors, however vague some of his figures may seem, however formless the shadows. To him, the outline is as clear and distinct as that of a geometrical diagram. For this reason, Mr. Poe has no sympathy with mysticism. The mystic dwells in the mystery, is enveloped with it, it colors all his thoughts, it affects his optic nerve especially, and the commonest things get a rainbow edging from it. Mr. Poe, on the other hand, is a spectator ob extra. He analyzes, he dissects, he watches. With an eye serene, the very pulse of the machine. For such it practically is to him, with wheels and cogs and piston rods, all working to produce a certain end. This analyzing tendency of his mind balances the poetical, and by giving him the patience to be minute, enables him to throw a wonderful reality into his most unreal fancies. A monomania he paints with great power. He loves to dissect one of these cancers of the mind, and to trace all the subtle ramifications of its roots in raising images of horror. Also he has strange success conveying to us, sometimes by a dusky hint, some terrible doubt, which is the secret of all horror. He leaves to imagination the task of finishing the picture, a task to which only she is competent. For much imaginary work was their conceit deceitful, so compact, so kind, that for Achilles' image stood his spear, grasped in an armed hand himself, behind was left unseen save to the eye of mind. Besides the merit of conception, Mr. Poe's writings have also that of form. His style is highly finished, graceful, and truly classical. It would be hard to find a living author who had displayed such varied powers. As an example of his style, we would refer to one of his tales, The House of Usher. In the first volume of his Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, it has a singular charm for us, and we think that no one could read it without being strongly moved by its serene and somber beauty. Had its author written nothing else, it would alone have been enough to stamp him as a man of genius. and the master of a classic style in this tale, occurs perhaps the most beautiful of his poems. The great masters of imagination have seldom resorted to the vague, and the unreal as sources of effect they have not used dread and horror alone, but only in combination with other qualities, as means of subjugating the fancies of their readers. The loftiest muse has ever a household and fireside charm about her. Mr. Poe's secret lies mainly in the skill with which he has employed the strange fascination of mystery and terror. In this, his success is so great and striking as to deserve the name of art, not artifice. We cannot call his materials the noblest or purest, but we must concede to him the highest merit of construction. As a critic, Mr. Poe was aesthetically deficient, unerring in his analysis of dictions, meters, and plots. He seemed wanting in the faculty of perceiving the profounder ethics of art. His criticisms are, however, distinguished for scientific precision and coherence of logic. They have the exactness, and at the same time, the coldness of mathematical demonstrations, yet they stand in strikingly refreshing contrast with the vague generalisms and sharp personalities of the day. If deficient in warmth, they are also without the heat of partisanship. They are especially valuable, as illustrating the great truth, too, generally overlooked, that analytic power is a subordinate quality of the critic. On the whole, it may be considered certain that Mr. Poe has attained an individual eminence in our literature, which he will keep. He has given proof of power and originality. He has done that which could only be done once with success or safety, and the imitation or repetition of which would produce weariness.